Welcome to welcome to New Life Church online and in person. I'm Jimmy, pastor of New Life, and we're glad you're with us today. And sometimes things don't go exactly as planned, and when you're me, things really sometimes go way off track. And last Sunday, the computer the phone cut out for the recording, and I actually just realized that I have it set the way that it's not supposed to be set today. So who knows what'll happen? We're praying that everything goes smoothly and wonderfully. But last week, half of the sermon pretty much got cut off. So this week, I'm actually recording on my tablet. So if it cuts out, have patience. I'll eventually figure out or talk to somebody smarter than me about how to get it all onto the computer somehow. Long story short, it'll be there at some point. We're glad you're here, and we're going to ask you a question today, like we always do. The question today is, are you going to watch the big game, the Super Bowl? I know we're not charging anything, so we can call it Super Bowl, right? So are you going to watch the Super Bowl? And if so, and I'm watching, I'll be looking online at answers to, if so, like in a normal year, what is your favorite part about the Super Bowl? Commercials. Commercials?
Yeah.
Halftime show.
Halftime show?
Or the Puppy Bowl.
Puppy bowl.
Yes.
Puppy Bowl, there we go. For me, my favorite part has always been the getting together, having a party, and eating a ton of food. I mean, I've won several Super Bowl chili cook-offs, and I especially love chicken wings. And just like the food is the biggest part of the Super Bowl to me. So that being said, it really doesn't relate to the message today, but it relates to today, right? So we're going to be talking in the book of Mark, or talking from the book of Mark. We've been in the book of Mark for a while, and we're going to be in Mark 15, verses 40 through 47. And this part is a part that's often skimmed. People don't really discuss this part too much. It's about the burial of Jesus. And, it's like sometimes we got point A and point C. Jesus was crucified on the cross. That's point A. And point C, Jesus rose from the dead. The resurrection. That's a point C. We don't really talk about the point B, which I think there's a lot that we can still learn from this section. And so we're going to be starting going through little by little like we always do. I'll read something, then we'll talk about stuff. So starting at verse 40, there were also women looking on from afar, among whom were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James the Less and Joseph, and Salome. That's James Joseph, period, and Salome, who also followed him and ministered to him when he was in Galilee, and many other women who came up with him in Jerusalem. So verse 40 through 41 actually starts at the cross still. After Jesus had given himself over to death, and the centurion said, "Surely this is the Son of God," here's these women. And they were there. They were watching a little bit from afar. They were seeing what was happening. They were paying close attention, which, if you know a woman, they like to pay close attention. And so here's these women, and prior to this, Mark hadn't really talked about women a whole lot. He didn't really name them, at least. We had Peter's mother-in-law, and we had the woman with the issue of blood. We had the soldier's daughter, who Jesus raised from the dead, and we had the woman that anointed Jesus with the expensive perfume, the nard. And it was mainly the men that got named and were spoken of by name and kind of got all the attention. Now you have to remember that, those times that's what happened. But right now, here at the cross, with the exception of John, there were few men to be found. Like the rest of the disciples, Peter, all those guys, they took off. They were scared. And remember, Mark, what we talked about in the beginning of the book of Mark, Mark is believed by most scholars to have been Peter's account of the gospel relayed to Mark, who recorded it. So Peter wasn't around to tell Mark what happened at this point. All the guys were hiding, fearing for their lives. And, like I said, women back then were kind of the lesser, they didn't really, we didn't talk about women as much. And they were considered unreliable, and they were too emotional, all the stuff that is so untrue, right? Women aren't emotional, and I mean, for real, they are reliable. I know, because I would be lost without my wife. And we've come a long way since then. I believe there's still a long way that we can go with women and giving them equality. But I love, like, Foursquare, which is the church. New Life is Foursquare Church. And we value women. We see the importance, the value of women, and we treat them as equal. There's women pastors, women who can preach, women that are in leadership, women that are, there was actually, when the new president was elected in Foursquare, it was an election between the Randy Remington, who is president, and a woman, Tandy Donahoe. That's how far women have come. I believe there is still some places we can go. But here, Mark points out some women. This is the beginning of a change. Because where were the men? The unreliable men were the ones that were hiding and cowering in fear. So he names some. We have Mary Magdalene, who, if you remember the name, recognize the name, Mary Magdalene was a formerly demon-possessed prostitute. Not exactly someone that you would think would be one that would be trusted with the gospel message, but she was. We have Mary, the mother of James the Less and Joseph. These guys are believed to be cousins of Jesus, and James the Less, I guess they called him that because he was shorter. That's kind of a put down to me, but James the Less and Joseph, and then we have Salome, who was the mother of James and John, the sons of Zebedee. So these were people that day, that society might not necessarily trust to be entrusted with the gospel. And I hate to say it, but even when I read several commentaries when studying this passage, they spoke about these women as being like the disciples. Like the disciples, they did this. Like the disciples, they did this. Make no mistake, these women were disciples. They followed Jesus. They, truthfully, like disciples, maybe, that might be true. They were like the disciples, except for the fact that they weren't bickering with each other, jockeying for position, doubting Jesus, and just all the things that we've already studied that the disciples have done that they've done so wrong a lot of times. These ladies ministered to Jesus, served him. They were the epitome of what Jesus spoke about in Mark chapter 10. Whoever wants to be first has to be a slave to all. Verse 45 of Mark 10 says, "For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." Bernard of Clairvaux said that Mary Magdalene was the apostle to the apostles. She was like a step above because she was reliable. She all the stuff that should have disqualified her, she didn't let that stop her. She did what God called her to do. And Theophact, the Byzantine archbishop, said, "And so the order is inverted, for the Jew kills and the Gentile confesses. The disciples fly and the women remain. The women remain faithful." This is inspiring to me because I don't know about you, but I have been counted out, been thought of as not right for the job, not right for what I know God has called me to do. I mean, maybe you've experienced it too, where people have told you the mistakes you made in the past. Or you've looked at people that have made mistakes in the past and you think they can never do anything. They're still the same person. Because we love to receive grace, right? We love to receive the grace of God. That's my favorite thing is receiving grace. But it's not so easy to give that grace. And we've had traditions that might stop somebody. Women were told they couldn't do things because of tradition. The words that people say, self-doubt, physical things. I've had physical things. I've had people tell me that I shouldn't be preaching because of some of the things. I can't see well. I'm not internet friendly. Because sometimes when I preach, I pause. Which I think is a nice dramatic thing, but I've been told that that's not good for like recordings and internet friendly stuff. But if I listened to the voices of the naysayers, the people that said you can't do it, you're not able, your eyes, your whatever it is, your ears, your teeth, your delivery style, if I listened to that stuff, I would be stopped from doing what God has called me to do. And in the middle of this pandemic, when we got shut down for a while and we couldn't even meet, there were times prior to the pandemic where I tried to record, so we could put the recording on the website or something like that, it'll be great. I was told, you gotta have sermons online, Every time I tried to record, I became the biggest bumbling idiot. And I could not speak, and I'm like, and I had to stop the recording because I couldn't do it. And then the pandemic comes, and the only way that we can get the word out and to continue as a church is to record. But if I listened, the people that are tuning in, you that are online right now, maybe here or maybe there, whatever, you that are online listening and watching, wouldn't hear the word, wouldn't have the ability to share that word. By the way, hit share and share the message if you would like, because I believe these words are important. Nothing should stop you from what God has called you to do. These women are inspiring to me. They're inspiring. I will not let anything stop me from what God has called me to do. The second person in this passage, by the way, we're talking about the different people in the passage. We got the women, and then in verse 42, we meet the next person. Now, when evening had come, because it was the preparation day for the Sabbath, Joseph of Arimathea, a prominent council member who was himself waiting for the kingdom of God, coming and taking courage, went to Pilate and asked for the body of Jesus. Pilate marveled that he was already dead. And summoning the centurion, he asked him if he had been dead for some time. So when he found out from the centurion, he granted the body to Joseph. Then he bought fine linen, took him down, and wrapped him in the linen. And he laid him in the tomb which had been hewn out of the rock, and rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. So here we got Joseph from Arimathea, who was from Arimathea, which there's really no definitive record of the actual location of Arimathea. It's believed to be about 20 miles northwest of Jerusalem. That kind of stuff doesn't really matter to me. The point is, there was this guy named Joseph of Arimathea who was now living in Jerusalem. And he was a respected council member, which means he was a member of the Sanhedrin. And Matthew said he was quite wealthy. He had a lot of money. And you have to be if you have a family tomb available that's not been used, that's carved out of the rock. And Matthew also said that he was a disciple of Jesus, but he was in secret. He was afraid of his job, the Sanhedrin. He was afraid of this religious body that, sought to remove Jesus from his position, to get him out of there because they were threatened by him. So he was afraid that the Sanhedrin, there'd be repercussions if they found out that he was a disciple. And Luke said that he didn't consent to the actions against Jesus. So he remained secret until he didn't. Then he was all in. The esteemed council member, secret follower, couldn't keep a secret any longer. He made a courageous move. Verse 43 says, coming and taking courage. So, what's the courage? Why was it courageous? I mean, what's the big deal? He just asked for the body. But the truth is, this guy could and probably did lose everything because of the fact that he went and took the body of Jesus. Because normally, the bodies of the crucified were all lumped in. The punished that were killed, they were all thrown into this pit. And speaking of being lumped in, Joseph could have been lumped in as being a follower of Jesus, which means he's just as guilty by association, and he could have been killed. So his career with Sanhedrin was done, over kaputski. Then his reputation was shot. He was one of these Jesus followers. And, I mean, talk about a scary enemy. This Sanhedrin wouldn't be just some whispers and stuff. He probably was blackballed from the community, maybe thrown in jail for what he did, but he was courageous. And he was courageous with his money. These tombs, they were not cheap, and they were cut, it says hewn, which means cut into the rock. He probably saved money for a long time, saved up the money so that he could have this tomb for his own burial and probably for his family. He was courageous with his possessions. Nothing compared to the honor of Jesus. He bought new linen, which wasn't cheap. That was pretty expensive too. And John says that Joseph took Nicodemus. Remember him? Nicodemus was the one in John 3 who went to see Jesus in the middle of the night. He was a religious leader. Went to see Jesus in the middle of the night. And Jesus said, you must be born again. That's where we get John 3:16. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him will not perish but have everlasting life. So he bought 75 pounds of burial spices, which, again, a lot of money. He wrapped Jesus' body in these linens and these spices. This is convicting to me. What am I willing to give? Am I willing to trust God with my finances? Joseph, I don't think he stopped and thought, okay, I'm committing career suicide. My reputation is going to be shot. I'm out of a job. I better budget. I better maybe hold back some of that money that I have. No, he didn't care. All he cared about was serving Jesus. I want to break from the plan today. These people were convicting to me. And as I was studying this message, I was anxious. I was anxious all day yesterday, as I was writing stuff and doing stuff on my phone. And last week was a train wreck as far as, digital stuff and all that. And at the end of the message last week, I talked about how to be saved. So I want to real quickly share my story. Yeah, we're good on time. I got 10 minutes. Quickly share my story. I grew up in a church. I'm basically about as close to being born in a church as possible. I mean, as soon as I came home from the hospital that weekend, I'm in church. The baby that was in, the little brown thing in a basket. I was in church, and I've been in church, heard thousands and thousands of sermons, and didn't really pay a whole lot of attention. And when I was a kid, the backyard Bible school happened at my house. And I'm about 5 years old. They were talking about how if you're, the fire and brimstone, if you're not saved, if you don't know Jesus, you'll be cast into a lake of fire. And I was like, well, at 5, I was smart enough to know I didn't want that, right? I didn't want to be cast into a lake of fire. And So I said the prayer, Jesus, come into my heart. And I thought it was golden. But I never matured beyond that spiritual baby phase. Growing up, getting older, I was in high school, honestly, if there was a drug in front of me, I took it. Whatever it was, I didn't care. I just loved being numb, loved being high, loved being so stoned out of my gourd. I didn't know what was up. But I still went to church. And we had a band. We had a band, the Second World, and we were a bunch of guys that we sang Christian songs and even the music to be as much like the world, just standing on the edge, as close to the edge of being like the world without stepping over, without losing our being saved and that whole cast in the lake of fire thing. And I still went to church, and I never paid attention, really. I got dunked, as a friend of mine called it at 15, I think it was. I got baptized. And baptism is supposed to be something important. You down into the water, and you die to yourself. You die in your old ways, and you're raised up with Jesus, and you're living anew. But I didn't do that. I just got dunked because that was what everybody did. And I'm sure I wanted to impress a girl or something. And as I got older, life got different. And you know what? I thought about it. I was the enemy's favorite kind of Christian. I was the devil's favorite kind of Christian. Because we're supposed to be God's ambassadors. We're called to be God's ambassadors. But what was I ambassading? I was telling the world that you could live this duplicity, is what I was living. I would be a good little church boy on Sunday, know all the right words, have all the right verses from memory and everything like that. I could do all this stuff. And 6 other days of the week, it was only probably an hour or 2 that I was living that way. And man, as soon as it was done, I took off my Christian costume, basically, and I was like the rest of the world. And when hard times came, and hard drugs came, and things got more and more available, I did more and more stuff that I knew I shouldn't be doing. But I prayed the prayer when I was 5 years old. As I got older, it got less and less satisfying. And I don't have time to go into too much of it, but I came to a point where I found myself on a beach in Michigan, sitting on a sand dune in the middle of the night, smoking a pack of cigarettes and crying and talking to God and looking for a reason why I shouldn't just keep on walking into the water until I was done, gone, over. Anybody ever feel like that? And I said, God, I'm going to give you one more try. This time I'm going to do it for real. And I've still made some mistakes since then. But I went home, all my stuff that I had that I shouldn't have, most of it was flushed. The other stuff was buried deep into the garbage. And, I started going to Bible studies. And I started going to church. I started taking things for real. And I read the Word. And I learned 2 Corinthians 5:17, which I love, and that's the verse for this church. If anyone is in Christ, he's a new creation. The old is gone. All things have been made new. And I remember those verses that I was taught back in Awana Club when all I cared about was if I learned enough verses, my team would win and I'd get a candy bar at the end of the night. I learned these verses, Romans 3:23, but now it stuck. All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Romans 6:23, the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. And then I realized something else. Nowhere in the Bible does it say to ask Jesus into your heart. Because that's not all it is. I asked Jesus into my heart. I made this tiny little itty bitty corner there was just enough room to try and squeeze him in, as long as it was convenient, as long as things were comfortable. That's when I realized I needed more. I need Jesus to completely have ownership of my heart. Romans 10:9 says, if you confess with your mouth that Jesus Christ is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. The confessing isn't just saying, yeah, I believe Jesus is Lord. Let's get back, let's go watch some football now. But do I believe, truly believe? Do I confess? Is my life line up with that? So you don't have to have fancy words. Maybe you've never given your life to Jesus. Maybe you don't know if you're saved. So there is value in praying and asking for Jesus to be your Lord. That's what we have to do. So maybe you want to share it with your friend, whatever you haven't said it yourself, or you want to share it with your friend, you don't know how to share with your friend, and of course the computer cut off, or the phone cut off last week. So I'm just going to pray. You might want to pray with me or share it with your friend. Jesus, I recognize what you did on the cross, that you took on my sins, that you took my sins, all those things that I did wrong, every single thing that I've done wrong. You took that and you washed me clean. If I make you my Lord, if I turn from my old ways, if I die to myself, I can live for you. So today, I'm giving myself completely to you. In Jesus' name, amen. That's all it takes. You've been made new. You've been cleansed. You're a brand new creation. Live it.